information then subject to public records?
Yeah.
Again,
Well,
I'm sorry, give me your name again.
Tara Goodnight, Policy Director. Yes, in revised code today, drillers are required to submit something that's called a well completion log to the Department of Natural Resources, and it tells them, here's all the chemicals we're going to use. They actually have to submit copies of invoices, and they have to submit copies of something called a material safety data sheet, which
Say that
tell you
again?
whether a material safety data sheet. That's something that's used in the chemical industry. It tells you if the item is a corrosive, a carcinogen, how to deal with spills, how to deal with, skin contact, things like that. So it's really for emergency responders. There is no requirement in code, and there's no requirement in the rules that have been promulgated by the department for disclosure then to the public on a well-by-well basis. So what the department has put out that's available today is there's a page on their website called Material Safety Data Sheets, and all it does is list the chemicals that are in use in Ohio, but it doesn't tie them to any specific well. What Jenetta mentioned is there's a voluntary disclosure website put together by industry called frackfocus.org. And as far as I know, only one of the drillers in Ohio, Chesapeake Energy, is using that site voluntarily to disclose the chemicals it's using in Ohio wells. So an easy move would be to just simply require all the drillers to disclose on that site, since they're already sending the data to Natural Resources, put it on that site as well. But the other thing you could do is just change the rules that the department enforces.
So the material safety data sheet just lists, I mean, speaking of, like it's a recipe, so it would have like, flour, eggs, and butter, instead it has
There's
toluene and something else in specific quantities for each one, or?
It does not. What it is there's a sheet for each ingredient in the recipe. So what would happen is Chesapeake would tell Department of Natural Resources, we just completed this well, and we use these 5 ingredients, and here's the safety sheet for each one.
But not the ratios.
But it wouldn't
like
tell you the ratios.
a
And there are
couple
some, especially in other states, I think are looking at disclose everything, including the ratio. But that's where you get into that real proprietary. The companies say, well, our exact mix of detergent and sand and water is what makes our wells produce the highest amount. And I don't know if we want to fight that battle necessarily, but at least knowing what those materials are. I mean, if the whole point is for safety, why are we allowing them 60 days after they've used the chemicals to even disclose to the state? Why not do that up front when they're preparing to do the well
And you're
stimulation?
saying the list that's on the ODNR website is only the total list of all the ones that are reported?
Yeah,
not
curious.
for this well or this well or this well?
Exactly. In fact, the way that they've organized it, if you go to the material safety data sheet list on ODNR's website, it lists 4 companies who I presume are the companies that come in and do the well stimulation. And under each company it lists, 15, 20 chemicals that they routinely use. But no ratios, no tying it to specific permits or specific wells.
I want to follow up on the reserve estimates in your report. I was kind of surprised to see that the estimate for oil is about 6 times, potentially 6 times as much for natural gas.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's an untold story. Tara, do you want to take that one again? And
Sure.
where we got
I can take that one again. You guys are probably all familiar with this report that the Ohio Oil and Gas Education Program put out, that it had a big jobs number in it, but one of the things that lesser known elements of it is it had production forecasts for how year by year the natural gas was going to be extracted, and that's where we were able to calculate the $86 billion from gas. We don't have anything like that for the oil that's estimated to be in Ohio shale. The best that we know is that the Ohio Department of Natural Resources themselves say it's between 1.3 and 5.5 billion barrels that are down there. So all we did was apply a $100 a barrel market price, which is the current going rate. We think probably is going to be in the ballpark of where it's going to be going forward. So that's where you get the value. Whether all of that oil can ever be extracted and over what time period, we just don't know. So that's why we didn't put time periods on that revenue. It could take a long time. It could never be 100% extracted, but that's the range of what's down there according to the department.
From what I understand, fracking doesn't work that well for oil, right?
I think that I've read that. I think that they're constantly improving, though. I mean, I think that what they've been able to do with gas has been developed over the last 8 to 10 years. So we certainly expect technology will improve. And if there's that many billions of dollars worth of stuff down there, I think they're going to find a way to get to it.
The other thing too is that the industry itself has even said publicly that they're getting more excited about the oil because as natural gas prices drop, then the oil, whose price continues to rise becomes even more interesting to them. And it may explain, at least in part, why there's this land rush going on, where the inflated values continue to be paid by a number of these companies for mineral rights, because they believe that this oil is going to be, at least a significant portion of it will be recoverable and will make them a lot of money.
Just to be clear here on the excise tax, or the severance tax you call it, this increased severance tax would apply to not just wells using the relatively new horizontal fracking, but it would apply to the vertical fracking that's been going on for decades. It would be all oil and gas, not
Yes.
just the...
You talked about having the increased severance tax cover the infrastructure costs associated for the county roads. The governor seems to be talking about a separate impact fee plus the severance tax. Is there any reason why one is better than the other, or was it just...
Do you want to take a whack at that?
I mean, I think we just wanted to raise the issue that that those considerations be made, and certainly there'll be a legislative debate as any proposal goes forward. We just wanted to put out there that there is going to be this infrastructure impact, and to make sure that that's somehow recaptured. And assigning part of the collections from a severance tax to the general revenue fund so you could share it back with communities is one way to approach it. Another way would be to charge an impact fee. One way that we did find in some of our research that has been challenging for some other states is to require a bond on the part of the drillers to pay for infrastructure costs. It's been hard for local communities to kind of prove that the damage was done by the company and therefore use the bond to pay for it. So we think we just have to go in with an assumption up front that there's going to be infrastructure impact and have that be built into whatever the state charges as a fee or a tax.
Let me just also say, too, there's one other point here, and that is that clearly the infrastructure damage, whatever it is, has to be covered. But the other reason that we want to talk about a reasonable windfall profits tax on the oil and gas companies is we do not agree, and we don't think most Ohioans will agree, with the idea that the oil and gas companies should have the lowest possible tax we can imagine. There is no reason that Ohio has the second lowest extraction tax in the country. And as I said, if you look at our chart, Texas is not even the highest. It's not the highest by far. If you just raise the tax rate to what companies are already paying in the state of Texas, the amount of money that you could get from that would be, enough to substantially offset many of these budget cuts to school districts and local governments. Right now, nobody has any plan or prospect for replacing that money. Voters have turned down Senate Bill 5. The governor says, don't have any money for bailouts. Well, this is a new revenue stream that comes, coincidentally, from exploiting Ohio's natural resources. If this can help taxpayers, help school districts, and help local governments, then it's a very good idea.
So the companies obviously are going to oppose that, and they've already begun to argue that any increase would slow down, the development of all of this, slow down new jobs, all of that.
It certainly hasn't slowed them down in Texas. And as I said before, if you want to drill in shale, you've got to go where the shale is. Ohio is where the shale is. I find it not credible that the oil and gas industry will walk away and leave on the table from tens of billions of dollars of revenue and profit simply because they're being asked to pay the same rate of taxation they're already paying in Texas.
Dale, a little earlier